Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. If you're watching today on YouTube, you're going, something is different about today's podcast, and it is. I am not in the studio today. I am in a motel room in South Dakota, and I'm so excited that I could even make this technology possible, because just a few short months ago, that wouldn't have been possible. We got everything set up. I'm in a motel room. I'm here at the Bassmaster Elite Series in South Dakota. And what's really exciting is this. Last week's guest, Brandon Card, is actually leading this week's tournament. So if you're interested in who the tournament leader is here at the Bassmaster Elite Series, go back and you can catch up on last week's episode. It was a great episode. This week, we're going to be celebrating a couple of things. I have been doing this podcast now. We're coming up on the 25th episode. Now, there was some debate because we started with episode 0, whether today is 25 or next week's 25. So we're going to do kind of a best of compilation type of deal of, the next 2 weeks. And so if you've missed the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, we're going to give you a chance to catch up on some of the ones that we've done, and some of the ones that have gotten the most views, some of the most popular ones. And one of those is going to be Hank Parker. We're going to be going back and listening to an excerpt of Hank Parker's testimony. We're going to be listening to Nick LeBrun, who has won 2 Major League Fishing tournaments this year since his podcast debut on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. He's won 2. And Brandon Card's leading. I'm not saying anything, not insinuating anything there. But no, Nick LeBrun's going to be giving his testimony. And then the testimony of Al Odom, who is the Fishers of Men National Tournament Director. His son passed away, and God has just used that event in his life to do mighty, mighty things for the Lord. And it's a very moving, very stirring testimony. And so if you've missed some of our episodes, we're going to catch you up, because we're celebrating 25 episodes with the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Coming up right now.
Well, then my life at home was chaotic. My dad was a drunk. I'm a high school dropout. I have nothing at all going. And my dad gets saved. When my dad got saved, it was the difference between night and day. I mean, it was a miracle. It was amazing. He went from being the worst guy right back to his old self, even better. And my dad was on fire for Jesus, so he started witnessing to me. Well, here I am, a high school dropout with nothing going for me, but I had way too much pride to accept Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
I'm right in the middle of Hell's theme song. I did it my way. Right. And that was it, man. I'm going to live my life. So here I am, a high school dropout, confused, full of anger, bitter. I didn't think it was fair that my cousins, they had everything. I had nothing. Their dads were sober. My dad had been a drunk. I just felt like God had cheated me. The whole world was unfair. I was a victim. And I played the role of the victim in my heart, and I was just full of bitterness. And I got my mind on fishing professionally. And so that was my goal. And my dad used to quote to me, Matthew 16:26, what would it profit a man if he gained the whole world and lost his soul? Or what would a man give in exchange for his soul? And my dad would read it to me, Hank, what would you have if you won every bass tournament in the world and died and went to hell? That used to drive me crazy. Yeah. And so as time went on, I wouldn't talk to my dad anymore. I'd made up my mind, the gospel of Jesus Christ will make you mad, sad, or glad, but it won't leave you neutral.
That's right.
You got to deal with it. So here's this kid full of bitterness, full of anger, confused, proud, and my dad's so humble. My dad's so bad wanting me to get saved. And man, I don't want to deal with it anymore. I don't want to deal with it. And he would quote all the scripture, and it make me feel uncomfortable, because the word of God is much like a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw. Yeah. And I knew I was lost, but I wouldn't admit it for nothing. He had asked me from time to time when I quit talking to him, he said, son, are you happy? when you lay down at night and it's just you and God, do you have peace in your heart? And I'd lie like a dog. I'd say, man, yeah. No, I didn't. I was empty. Well, time went on. I began to fish. I started winning. I probably won more money in a single year than in one tournament than he made the whole year. But I still was not happy. There was something missing. Well, my dad, he put gospel tracts because I wouldn't talk to him anymore. I'd be somewhere at 4:00 in the morning putting my socks on. I said, what is in my sock? It'd be a gospel tract. And he'd leave them anywhere he thought I could read them. God's simple plan of salvation. You must be born again. Man, I didn't want to hear that. Well, my dad was killed in an automobile accident, and he left a note in his Bible for his pastor not to preach a traditional funeral for him, but to preach the gospel, that he had two sons that were lost, me and my brother. And I got saved at my dad's funeral.
Wow.
I know what that peace was he was asking me about that I lied about. I didn't even know what peace was. In my heart, you talking about chaos? Chaos was when I would get caught in an electrical storm out fishing. Man, if one of those bolts of lightning hit me, I'd be in hell, and I knew that. Yeah. But when I got saved, all that was gone.
You were
47 years ago.
Wow.
And I work hard. Work ethic was instilled in me. And, I had great parents that loved me. But I didn't grow up in church. Okay. If we went to church on Easter and Christmas, that was a lot. Okay. And so, I grew up kind of just believing in God and thinking that, well, I'm a good guy. Okay. And, I'm not as bad as all these other people. Right. And, I met my wife, Jolene, in 2011. And Jolene had been a Christian since she was about 13. Okay. And Jolene said that, hey, before we get married, we got to go to counseling with my pastor. And I said, counseling? We're not even married yet. You don't go to counseling unless you're about to get divorced or something. That's just how arrogant and ignorant and prideful I was. And she's just begging me, just please, just come to this with me. It's important to me, and just please do it. I was like, okay, that's fine. So we went to Frisco, Texas, and met with her pastor. Her pastor had recently been relocated to the Dallas area. And even though we were living in Tower, Texas, but we went and met with Pastor Dwayne Moore. And Pastor Dwayne looked at Jolene and said, hey, Jolene, well, why don't you share your testimony today with how you come to know Christ? And she did. She told a story about being at church camp when she was a teenager, and just felt God call her and surrender her life to Christ. It was never the same. And then he looked at me and said, okay, well, Dick, what about you? What's your testimony? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I'm a good guy. I do the right thing. I work hard, and I'm not. I don't get drunk and do drugs and drown puppies on the weekend. So I'm a good guy, right? And he said, okay, all right. And so we left there that day. The next day, he called Jolene and said, listen, Jolene, Nick is a great guy. Man, what a hard working dude and just a morally good guy. But he's lost. And as your pastor, I really don't recommend that you marry him. And man, that was pretty bold for him to say that. Yeah. But that was biblical. Okay. Because the Bible talks about being unequally yoked. And what did Jolene do? She's like, ooh, yeah, so you're right, but I don't really want to hear that right now. And if you'll just do our wedding, that'd be great. And he said, yes, ma'am. Okay. And so we got married, and a year goes by, and Jolene calls Pastor Dwayne in tears, and he's like, "Hey, what's wrong? What's going on?" And she's like, "Nothing. Our marriage is perfect. Everything's great. But I'm so afraid that Nick's going to die out on the water and die and go to hell and wonder why I never was able to share with him and lead him to Christ." Mm-hmm. And Pastor Dwayne said, "Well, Jolene, this is what I warned you about. I warned you about this situation, and here you are." And he said, "You got to find a way to minister to him and just try to be sharing with him." And Jolene knew that if she would have done that, it would have pushed me away and it wouldn't have been received well. And she was right. And so what did Jolene do? She reached out to friends of mine like Vince, like JD, and some other guys, and just grabbed them by the shirt collar and said, "Hey, I need your help. I know y'all think Nick is this perfect guy on this pedestal, but he's lost. And I need you to be trying to find a way to minister to him." And they did. I'd go fishing with Vince, and I'd spend the day on the water with Vince, and I'd come home and tell Jolene, "Man, Vince was weird today. He was asking me all this weird stuff and wanting to talk about church." And or JD, "Man, I don't think I'm gonna hang out with him for a little while. He's getting too weird on me." And Jolene would kind of say, "Well, they're just worried about you, Nick. They just want to know that they just care about you." "Well, I'm good. I'm a good guy. I mean, I don't need all that preaching." Okay. And and I would tell you that, yeah, I'm a good guy, and everybody saw me as a good guy, but I had a lot of hidden sin and a lot of hidden addiction in my life. And, since I was an early teen, I had a pornography addiction, and I carried that as an adult. And that was the one thing that I knew was really, really wrong and that I shouldn't be partaking in. But I justified it by saying, "Well, I'm perfect in every other area, though. I mean, I'm not drinking and smoking and doing drugs, and I'm nice to everybody. So, and that little bit of a hidden sin, that's no big deal. That's not hurting anybody." And men, listen to me. That's the lie of the enemy. Okay. It is hurting people. It's hurting you on the inside. It's ruining you. It's hurting your marriage. It's hurting your children. Huge lie of the enemy right there. But I had this hidden sin, and when you have a hidden sin like that for so long, you become desensitized. Okay. And you find yourself to where it's just normal and it's not unusual.
One of the fishing stories I want you to tell, I've only won one Fishers of Men tournament, and the Fishers of Men tournament I won, my partner's name was Sam Odom. It's your son, and you got a fishing story about Sam. And folks, let me tell you something. I want you to tune in, and I want you to really focus in and listen to what Al's about to share with you right now.
Well, Chris, telling my fishing story about Sam is really become special to me, and hopefully it'll be special and meaningful to your listeners. In 2008, Sam was 17 years old, and Dane, my oldest son, was 20. And Fishers of Men was putting on 3 legacy championships around the country, and we were actually at Lake St. Clair in Michigan.
Right.
And Dane was this was a legacy tournament, so it's an adult junior. He had Ross Burns, who was a really good fisherman too, but Ross at the time was like 16 years old, so he was the junior partner, and Dane was the adult, the 20 years old. And one of our rules in Fishers of Men allows family members to practice with your other family members at any time. So I was out there on the lake for a couple of days practicing, and we got in an area and we're catching smallmouth. I mean, some really nice ones. I mean, so 3 to 5 pound smallmouth. I mean, and catching a bunch of them. And so I began to kind of look around that area and notice looking for other boats. I mean, it's just a big flat out in the middle of Lake St. Clair, and there was 5 or 6 other boats out there fishing around. But like I said, it's just a big, wide open, expansive place, so plenty of room. And I started wondering if any of the other competitors were out there, and I noticed a man and a boy in the boat. And so this being an adult junior tournament, I was like, I was wondering, I said, I bet you that guy's in the tournament too. So I just kind of made a note of what they looked like and, the general size of them, what color boat they were in, stuff like that. And then we went to the meeting on that Thursday night. And after the meeting's over, I saw the man and the boy that I'd seen out there on the lake. And so I walked up to him and I said, hey, y'all catching them out there? And he did what most all fishermen do when they're, on them and they're getting ready for a tournament. No. I said, dude, you ain't got to fool me. I said, I know you're catching them. I said, my son and his partner, you're going to see them all day long. They're going, y'all in the same area out there and they're really biting. I said, y'all really have a good tournament. So it'll be a lot of fun, something like that. The last thing I remember saying to the group, I was kind of moderating the meeting and at the end of it, I said, guys, in the morning, we need to be at the ramp at 6:30 to put in, be in the water at 6:30 and we'll get you blasted off, stuff like that. And so anyway, went back to our motel, which is about 15 minutes away, and went to sleep. And at about 2:00, my phone rang. It's my wife, Sharon, and I could tell she was very upset. And she said, Al, she said, it's Sam. Sam was back home in South Carolina. And I said, well, what? She said, he's been in a terrible accident. And I said, well, I mean, what's the deal? She said, well, I don't know. She said, wait a minute, they're calling me back. I got to go. And she hung up. And about 3 or 4 minutes later, my phone rang again. And, that little 3 or 4 minutes in between there, it was like God had already almost revealed to me what had transpired, that I needed to be praying for strength and for wisdom and how to handle the situation. But she called me back and she said, he's gone. And Sam had been tragically killed in an automobile accident. He was with some buddies and they were out, in the country at somebody's farm that evening, and somebody had gone down the road and ran off the road and got stuck, and they called back and said, hey, we need somebody to come pull us out. And Sam was always, first one to jump in, let's go help our buddies. And they got in the truck, and his buddy was driving, Sam was in the back seat, and when they rounded the curve, we ran off the side of the road and overcorrected, hit a culvert, flipped up in the trees, and I went and saw that where that accident happened. There were 2 big pine trees. I mean, I'm talking about big ones, and they were both snapped off about 15 feet up where the truck hit them. And just so happened where one of those trees went straight across the back seat where Sam was sitting and killed him instantly. And man, that's a blow no parent can ever be prepared for. And I was just devastated and didn't really know what to do, but I'm like, I got to go home. And so I called my vice president, Bob, and I told him what had happened. And I said, Bob, I said, we're going home. I said, just people are going to wonder where I'm at because I'm the face of the organization. I said, just tell them I had a family emergency. I had to leave, and I didn't really want these guys to be, to have a big cloud hanging over their head when they're up there on their vacation with their kid fishing. And so anyway, we gathered our stuff up and we got in the elevator at 2:30 in the morning. The time we gathered everything together and packed up, and we got in the elevator at 2:30. And so me, Dane, and Ross, and who gets in the elevator with us at 2:30 in the morning? But the man and the boy that I saw out on the lake. The man's name is Ed Austin and his Ed Allen and his son Austin Allen. And they get in the elevator with us at 2:30. And I'm probably thinking to myself, what are they doing in the elevator with us right now? I mean, everybody should be sound asleep. I mean, you got almost 3.5 hours for you need to get up. And I'm sure he's looking at me thinking, well, what's the tournament director doing leaving? Looks like he's all packed up, leaving, skipping town right now. What? And so he asked me, he said, is everything okay? And I tell folks, I said, man, it was like somebody took a knife and just stabbed him and just twisted. I'm like, no, it's not. I said, I just got some really bad news. And I said, my other son, Sam's been tragically killed in a car wreck tonight, and we're headed back to South Carolina. And so the elevator got to the bottom, and And Ed said, man, is there anything we can do? I said, well, just pray for us. I said, and just kind of keep this between us. I told him what I told Bob about how we're going to handle it. And I said, if you just keep it between us, I'd appreciate it. And he said, man, I'm so sorry. And he turned and walked away. And little Austin, 9 years old, as they began to walk away, turned around and walked back to me and looked up at me and he said, kind of with little tears glistening in his eyes, he said, Mr. Al, he said, I'll catch him a 5-pounder, meaning he was going to catch a 5-pound smallmouth. I mean, that's what we're catching up there, smallmouth. And he said, meaning that's what he would do. He was going to kind of catch that in honor of Sam. And I said something like, you do that, Austin. I hope to see the picture on the internet or something like that. I mean, I'm in shock, dude. I just want to get home to my family. So, so we got in the car, began to drive home. I tell folks I learned some lessons driving home. Not all of them that I'm proud of. I learned one thing, that a Suburban had a Suburban at the time. A Suburban will actually tow a 21-foot bass boat over 90 miles an hour. I'm driving 90 miles an hour headed home, just trying to get home. It's a 22-hour drive from there to my house. And trying to get home. And if you drive and pull your boat 90 miles an hour, the crazy people will get in behind you and follow you because they figure they're safe. You're the guy in the front. Well, along around through Ohio someplace, a guy, Mr. Blue Light, comes up and pulls me and my 4 or 5 car entourage, pulls us all over to the side of the road. And he walks up to the window and he says, you in a hurry? I said, yes, sir, I am. I told him what had happened. He said, hit the road. I don't know what happened. The rest of them people sitting back there, they might all end up in jail.
They're all in jail right now. Yeah.
But anyway, we drove home and got home and did, planned a funeral for Sam and did something no parent should ever have to do. Went and picked out a casket for him and made all those plans. And then, I really felt like God wanted me to share at my son's funeral. I didn't know if I could do that because I'm an emotional guy. I can cry. I can cry better than Randy Howell can cry, but I didn't know if I could do that. So I kind of wrote down what I was going to say. And then when the funeral came on Sunday afternoon, I mean, God gave me the strength or the grace to be able to stand up there and to share and to smile and laugh and tell stories about Sam. A funny one was we used to have a little dog, Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell went on over the Rainbow Bridge just this last year, and we had to see her go because she was kind of our last connection to Sam as far as like a pet or anything. But Sam had a bunch of buddies over at the house one day, and this just kind of gives you kind of a little snippet of what Sam was like. He had a bunch of buddies, and Sharon had gone back in the bedroom, and Sam takes Tinkerbell and sticks Tinkerbell in the freezer and closes the door. And says, Mom, come here. And she comes back and she said, Mom, fix me some ice cream. And she's like, well, I ain't fixing you ice cream. Get your own. No, Mom, give me some ice cream. Of course, everybody's in on the deal but her, And so finally she goes over there and opens the freezer door and Tinkerbell's sitting there. But he was just mischievous, always into something, making people laugh, just kind of the life of the party guy. But, but I drove home that afternoon after that service in Sumter, which that's where Sam's buried. Right. And I was actually over there this week at his graveside. And but drove home and got home. And when I walked in the door, the first thought that crossed my mind was, go look at the internet, go look at the standings from that tournament. And I thought to myself, I was like, that's a weird thought to have coming home from burying your son, to go look at the standings from some bass tournament. Well, it's a 2-day tournament. And so I go over there and I click on the day one standings. And, Chris, as well as I do, a 5-pound smallmouth is a trophy smallmouth. That's huge. I mean, that's a really big one. I tell people it's like catching a 9 or 10-pound largemouth down here. And so I looked at the day one standings. And as I'm going down there, nobody had a 5-pounder on day one. And then I clicked on day 2. And I start going down and, wait a minute, somebody's got a 5-pounder. It's a 5.12 pound smallmouth. And I look and it's the team of Ed and Austin Allen, the man and the boy that I'd seen in the elevator. And so I called Bob Eads, my vice president, and I told him, I said, Bob, I see here where Ed and Austin caught a 5-pounder on day 2. And I said, do you know who caught that fish? He said, yeah. I said, I do too. It was Austin, wasn't it? He said, yeah, it was. Wow. So anyway, I had a replica mount.
Oh man, look at that.
I had a replica mount made of that fish, and I take that fish with me every place I go to speak and share. And I share that story about how God can speak to us in ways that really just minister to us more so than anything. He knows everything about us, and he knows the pain that I was going through as a dad, and he knew how to reach out of heaven and touch a little 9-year-old boy to catch a fish that was divinely appointed for him, that he told me he was going to catch. The biggest fish of that little boy's life. That boy had never caught a 5-pound smallmouth in his life, and that's what he told me he was going to catch for sand. And he did it.
Wow.
And you know, I tell folks, I said it's kind of like this. It's like God reached down out of heaven and put his arms around me and said, Al, said, I know how bad you're hurting because I've been there too. And I said, you know, but the thing, Chris, is there's a big difference. And you're a person that kind of taught me this story, and I've shared this many places too. And I tell folks, I said, you know, when I'm speaking to a group, I'll tell folks, look, I said, if somebody were to come through that back door right now with an Uzi submachine gun and say, hey, preacher man up front, you know, and Sam was sitting right up there beside me, and they were to say to me, hey, it's either him or it's them. Take your pick. I'm gonna either kill him or I'm gonna kill all of them. I tell folks, I said, man, I'd pray for you.
That's right.
I'd beg for you. I'd cry for you. I'd do everything I could for you. But you're not killing. You're not taking my son. I'm not giving him up freely.
Right.
That's what Jesus. That's what God did when He gave His Son freely. He made that choice to give His Son for us, and that's, to me, that's just the power of God's love for us, that He would choose to give His Son for us, and for us to do anything but to respond in faith and put our trust and faith in Him is ludicrous. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, because I know how much God loves us and how much He demonstrated that toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us.
Man, what a powerful, powerful story. Golly, is it? Wow. Those are some amazing testimonies. All three of those testimonies have one thing in common, and that is that Jesus Christ can change your life. Whether it's Hank Parker, Nick LeBrun, Al Odom, or any of our guests, all of them have had their lives changed by the person of Jesus Christ. If you're listening today and you don't know for certain where you're going to go when you die, listen, I would love to be able to show you from the Bible how you can know for certain that you have a relationship with Christ. It's the greatest decisions you'll ever make. And so my number, 864-414-9453, or you can go to chriswells.org, shoot me an email, and I would be delighted to show you how you can have a relationship with Christ. Hey, we'll talk to you next week. Tune in for part 2 on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up.